Today, we become legends.
Hey, my name's Ed, welcome back to the channel, and I just wanted to bring you guys a little quick sort of release guide for Maman Brigitte. I'm probably not going to be going quite as in-depth as I would on this with some of my normal guys, because she's only been out a little while and I've not played loads of her. But I have played a fair bit, and she has a really interesting kit design that I think there are a lot of intricacies that you can take advantage of to make her, you know, smoother to play and more powerful in general in your games. I do think she's completely broken. I'm very much on the side of thinking this god is absolutely busted. I think a rant is coming on her at some point, so keep an eye out for that. She seems completely insane when you look at the numbers. And of course, we've seen plenty of people completely destroy with her. My first game on PTS, I went like 22-2 or 22-1 or something like that. It was completely insane. So yeah, definitely does seem overpowered, but if you want to leverage that overpoweredness as much as you can, this guide's for you. I'm going to be going over builds, abilities, and then most importantly, a lot of tips and intricacies that you can do with the character. So if you already have a fundamental grasp of how her abilities work and generally how to build her, you should still find something useful from this, because there's going to be quite a lot of intricacies and tips that you can do to improve your gameplay on her. So first up, we'll just give a quick kit overview. I know I've done this before, but if you haven't seen any of my videos, you don't really know what this god's about. I'll just give a quick overview. So basically, her passive, every time you damage someone with basic attacks or abilities, and that includes ticks from abilities as well, you apply a soul spike to people. Upon reaching 5 of those soul spikes, they trigger and do 1% of your power per 1% of the target's missing health. So essentially, the easier way to think about the passive is you deal their percentage missing health of your power. So if they have 60% missing health, you deal 60% power scaling to them. This caps out at 70% missing health. So once they're at 70% or below, you're only going to be dealing 70% of your power. That's the maximum you can do with this. And of course, this scales up more damage based on how much health they have left. So if they are below 70% health, every time you trigger these 5 soul spikes, you're dealing 70% magical scaling to them, which is kind of insane. Obviously, at higher health pools, it's way less. If they're only down 10% health, you're only dealing 10% power scaling. It scales up enormously the lower the enemy gets. The soul spikes also last 10 seconds, so you pretty much in a fight never need to worry about these wearing off or anything. But yeah, basically, if you basic attack there, you can see every basic attack I'm doing it, and then they trigger at 5. So we have like 1, 2, 3, 4. They start lighting up, next one triggers them and does the percent health damage. It is not going to work on these Odin bots because they don't take damage and they're always at 100% current health, so basically we're never going to be dealing any damage with the passive. But that's how it works. And of course, it works on tick damage as well. So her 1, she breathes fire from the bottle, drains a fuel meter on the left there every time you do it. You can cancel it with right click at any time. And it applies a tick damage to them. Basically, it's 3 ticks after it expires, but because the initial one applies the burn, you get 3 more after that. So essentially, every time you do this little cancel, you're going to get minimum 4 ticks of damage. The longer you hold it on, the more you're going to keep reapplying that dot, of course. But then as you saw there as well, let's just go get some reduced cooldown, actually. That makes a whole lot more sense, I think. There we go. So, yeah, basically every time you do this cancel, you're getting like 4 ticks of damage or so. You can hold it on them as much as you want. And then when you run out of fuel or when you reactivate the ability, you do that stun. So if you want to, you can just instantly stun like that. It's no problem. In theory, you can absolutely maximize this ability by doing like 1 tick like that and just using 5 fuel each time. This is obviously not optimal for a team fight, but you can just keep doing this and keep reapplying that tick damage to people over and over again. The damage is going to be pretty negligible if you just keep doing this, but, you know, if you have no other cooldowns available, you can just, like, cancel it if you don't want to use the stun or whatever. And then, of course, as I mentioned, you can just insta-stun whenever you want. The cooldown of the ability does go up if you insta-stun, though. The more fuel you have available, the cooldown increases. So if I've got like 95 fuel available and I instantly do it, it's going to be a much longer cooldown than if I burn through all the fuel completely and then go for the stun. You see that the cooldown was lower. I do have 80% cooldown reduction on for jungle practice, but yeah, I think the base cooldown is 6 seconds. So if you burn all the fuel, that's going to be a 6-second cooldown, and it goes up to a maximum of 14 seconds. So if you just insta-stun like this after using only 5 fuel, that's going to be a 14-second cooldown. So yeah, this ability, really low cooldown regardless, to be honest. Even if you instant-stun with it, 14 seconds for an ability of this power level is actually like a really solid amount of cooldown. But of course, if you use a little bit more of it, if you maybe go like this, and then burn a little bit more and then stun, you're going to have a much lower cooldown. And of course, every tick of damage from this is going to apply the spikes. So minimum, you're getting 4 spike application. Let's do it on this guy. If you instant cancel it, you're still going to get 4 immediately there, and then your next one's going to trigger the damage. But moving on to her 2, this is a snake targeter that hits enemies and applies Madame's mark, which her ultimate also applies, which we'll talk about in a second. But basically, you throw this at enemies, it applies that mark, and every time you damage them with anything, that mark is going to deal additional damage, which will also trigger a spike. And that's the most important part of this ability, and also the Madame's mark from her ultimate is the same thing. Anytime you have this mark on them, all spikes are double. So you see they have 1, they now have 3. Then out of 5, I triggered them. If you apply this, it's just going to tick on them loads and just apply loads of spikes. So if you see, we do this, and then just do this. That got a total 5 proc and also 4 more there. So you can actually start generating insane amount of spikes if you just keep like doing stuff like this. And you can see that I went through about like 4 rounds of spikes in just that very small amount of time and probably dealt a shitload of my magical power if this was a real game. Worth noting about this ability is that it can very often double hit. It can single hit if you're firing it like this, for example. That's only a single hit, but if you're firing it any like, because you can compress the targeter, if you're firing it at all compressed, you're going to easily get a double hit. So you can see there, that was easily a double hit. So if we go on this guy, boom. That was actually a triple hit. It can triple hit rarely, and you see that all the spikes got consumed there. And that's because when you initially apply the mark with this ability, any future hits of this ability trigger the mark. It's not like only other abilities trigger it or anything, so if you fire this once, and then it hits again, that was again a triple hit. It's actually quite easy to get this thing to triple hit, and it's nearly impossible to get it to not double hit. You have to be trying to not get it to double hit by doing... Okay, that actually double hit. That is insane. You basically have to be trying to not double hit with this ability. And when you do double hit, you get the initial hit, which gets 1 spike, and then the second hit triggers the mark damage and the damage itself, so you get 3 spikes essentially when you double hit with this ability. And the best way I've seen to get this to double hit is hit it on the corners. So you can see here there's like 4 like individual lines basically. Hitting it on any of the corners basically guarantees a double hit. So you can see here I'm not really double hitting this guy. Still gets a double hit. You can see we have 3 spikes there and the mark on them. Whereas if you just get a single hit like this, you're just going to have 1 spike and the mark. So it's very easy to double hit them if you just hit them with any of the corners of this targeter. Which means that generally, if you're chasing someone down, optimally you want to stand just to the right of them and hit them with that first corner, because that just guarantees the double hit without having to worry about anything else. But of course, you can like compress the targeter, put it right on them, and easily get a triple hit as well, which is basically a full proc of your spikes, because you get the second hit triggers the spikes and does damage. The third hit triggers the spikes and does damage. That's 5. So basically, this ability can entirely proc a passive on its own if you get the triple hit, which is completely insane. But then, of course, you know, any future spikes you apply are going to be increased. I just missed that. We'll go on this guy. So yeah, any future damage you apply like this, like look at how many spikes rotations are going through there. I just went through about like 6 spikes rotations just by doing my 2 and then cancelling my 1 a few times. It's completely insane the amount of spikes this girl can put out. I've done some very brief math on it when I was looking at like for around how like broken she actually is. You can easily get 6 full spikes rotations just in 1 rotation of your kit, which is completely busted. But moving on to the 3, this is essentially Nox Dash, but you go into an enemy. You deal initial damage and then you also deal tick damage while you're inside them. Of course, this tick damage applies spikes, which is really nice as well. So you get 1 for the initial hit, and then actually you get up to 4 for the ticks of damage inside them. It doesn't do damage on the way out of the target, but on the way out you can also deal damage to other targets like that, but it's not going to deal more to the initial target. So you can see here, if I go in and then dash out, the spikes aren't triggered because I didn't get that final tick of damage. But if you dash in and wait the full time and then dash out, the spikes will trigger because you get that final... It ticks every 0.5 seconds for 2 seconds, so you need that final tick to actually fully trigger spikes with this ability. So yeah, this one and also this one can fully trigger spikes on their own, which is kind of insane. And then of course you have the synergy of like if you mark them and dash in, look at the amount of spikes I'm getting off there. It's kind of insane. Also worth noting with this ability is that you can right-click cancel it at any time. So for example, you might want to maximize the damage by like going in, waiting until like the final moment, right-click cancelling, and then continuing on with your abilities. Or if you just really want to like chase down, you're not really worried about like the tick damage from the dash too much, you want to get a bit more like burst damage out, you can just dash in, insta-cancel, and then like keep going on with your stun and stuff like that. And finally, the ultimate, which is actually very simple. Most of her kit is actually quite complex and takes a while to get used to, but her ultimate is incredibly simple. It's just this giant AoE explosion, knocks enemies up very slightly. It's not a very high knock-up, but it is a knock-up and does AoE damage. The AoE size of it increases based on how many soul orbs you have, which is part of the passive. Basically, every time you trigger 1 round of these 5 spikes, you get a soul orb. You see I got one there. So if we just like go in with our kit, basically do all of this, you very easily get to 5 soul orbs, and then the size of the ultimate is absolutely gigantic. It's normally not this big. This is a 5 soul orb ultimate, and you can get that in and then just kind of like go and continue with your kit and stuff, so... But yeah, that's her general kit. So we'll go over now a few tips for my man in terms of like maximizing your damage. So first up, the 1 is much better on instant cast, I've found. I'm usually a quick cast player, but I would highly recommend, if you're not an instant cast player, switching this ability to instant cast specifically. Mainly because it makes this cancel so much easier. It's a little bit cumbersome to do on quick cast, and I haven't even tried it on normal cast, but I imagine it's even worse on normal cast. But being able to do this just instantly and have the on-demand stun as quick as possible is really nice, so I like instant cast for that. It also seems to make the right-click cancel a little bit easier, so you can just like right-click cancel more effectively when you're on instant cast, and then obviously you can just go in quickly for the stun. So yeah, I highly recommend this ability on instant cast. Quick cast at the absolute least. I wouldn't recommend trying to do this on normal cast, it's really annoying. I mentioned this when we were covering the 2, but yeah, the 2 double hits very easily. You can get it by just standing to the right of the god and then hitting them with that first corner. Basically, any of the corners will double hit guaranteed no matter what. You don't even need to hit them with like 2 of the lines like this, for example. That was actually a triple hit because you're hitting them with like 2 of the corners there essentially. But if you just want an easy double hit, stand to the right, the back right, and then just hit them like that. Also with the 2 and the ult sort of as well, you want to try to engage with the 2 or the ult if you possibly can. Obviously the ult will be smaller size if you're engaging with it because you won't have as many soul orbs as if you just like dumped your whole kit. But the ult can be a good engage. It's long range, CC immune, you move at full movement speed while you're chasing people down and stuff. So the ult can be a really good engage, but otherwise try and engage with the 2 because you put that mark on them and the mark is ridiculous. Not only does it do 5 plus 5% scaling every time it triggers, but the main thing is that it triggers more spikes. Spikes trigger off of the damage that this mark does. So you can see here, just absolutely chaining through spikes on this guy because you have the mark on him. It's insanely important to get that mark on people before you start trying to go in with your big damage like from the 1 or whatever. So whether it's from the ult, you engage like this, you get the mark, and then you keep doing stuff like this, and then you maybe like refresh the duration of the mark with that, dash inside them or whatever. And you can just see how many ridiculous amount of spikes rotations you can get just from like dumping her kit on someone. It's kind of insane. But yeah, making sure you have that mark on people before you do any of your major spikes generation, mainly your 1 and your 3, is very important. The dash is completely broken in 1v1 situations. It's nice in team fights. It's basically like a free like kind of beat Aegis sort of. But in 1v1 situations, this dash is completely broken. If the enemy god has any kind of like telegraphed or channeled ability, you can just completely avoid it. So like if Susano drops his ult or whatever, boom, inside him. He can't drop the ult. You know, he's either gonna have to wait until you pop out of him and then maybe be able to time it. But if you time it right, you know, like, because it's a little bit of a charge up on Susano before it can knock up. So if you wait about a second after he casts it, then dash inside him, the ult's going to go off while you're inside him, and you completely immune his ult, and then you can just continue on with all of your busted damage. So this god completely destroys almost anyone in a 1v1. There are a few gods that obviously, if their abilities don't have like telegraph and you can't really react to them, it's not quite as good. But a lot of gods in the game have like, you know, Achilles execute, for example. If you're about to get Achilles executed, nah, straight inside him. And there's many applications for that in 1v1s in this game. There's so many gods that have abilities that you can very just easily dodge by doing this. And yeah, it's still strong in team fights. You can obviously still like immune a Vulcanal or a Kraken or whatever with this as well, provided you're not crippled. You can't dash while crippled, obviously, but you can immune big hits in team fights as well. But in the 1v1, this ability is just completely busted. If you can immune someone's ult with this, you win that fight on your own completely. There's nothing else you need to do, really. So yeah, worth noting with that, you probably want to take as many 1v1s as you can with Maman Brigitte, especially if you're in a matchup like Susano or whatever, where you can just completely immune one of their like key abilities. Take as many 1v1s as you can, because this ability will completely just blow people out of the water, because they basically don't have an ultimate against this god in certain situations. It's kind of insane. Alright, let's talk a little bit about builds now, though. So, I'm not really fully sure on how to build her just yet. I am putting this guide out very early after her release, so if you're watching this like a few weeks down the line when like Maman Brigitte builds have been kind of solved, this might not be quite as applicable, but I thought I'd give out some brief build information. I was going to just make a tips video, but then I decided, why not, let's just make it a full guide. Let's go over her abilities and what I've been building on her at the moment as well, because it might be useful to people. Again, I'm not saying this is completely optimal. This is just stuff I've been experimenting with and finding to work quite well. You know, if you've seen some pro player playing them and they have a different build, a decent chance it's better, but I just thought I would bring you guys what I've been building on her. So, first up, in terms of starting item, for jungle, I highly recommend Eye of the Jungle into Protector of the Jungle. Let's go into the fountain so we can actually buy items. This thing is just really good for her. She's one of those gods where, like, I wouldn't say building her full rings attack speed is a good idea. It can be fun, but I wouldn't say it's like the best meta idea for her. But she is one of those gods where like having that 35% attack speed is actually really nice for her. You know, these gods like Aokwang or like a Wheelix where like they're not necessarily wanting to be built full attack speed, but the attack speed is really nice synergy with them. And so yeah, I think Protector of the Jungle is absolutely the go-to in jungle for her. You could argue for Bumba's Hammer, because she does have a lot of cancels. So if we go over here, you can see you can do like this, and then you get a Bumba's Hammer proc, and then you can do this again. and just keep like doing it. You can't get multiple bombers procs per ability with this. Item effects will only proc once on it, so you are only going to get one Bomber's Hammer value off of this, but you can't like cancel it, get the bombers, and then like do stuff with your other abilities and things like that. She does have decent AA cancels, but to be honest, I don't find bombers overall that useful. I would say Eye of the Jungle into Protector is the way to go with her. If you are going for mid with her, I do recommend Conduit Gem into Gem of Focus. It gives her a lot of early game clear with the Conduit Gem, and then the movement speed from Gem of Focus is just really nice in like the late game once you have this online. Just that extra, like how much movement speed this item gives. An extra 15% movement speed and 15% damage increase is just really nice for her. She is okay with Sands of Time as well. Sands of Time into Pendulum is still good for her, but I would recommend Conduit Gem personally. I think she really likes the movement speed. In terms of recipe, I would probably just recommend Bow, I think. Given the insanely low cooldown, and for one, if you like burn off all the fuel, Bows can actually be like really good. So if you do Bow like all the way down here and then do that, you see the one basically doesn't have a cooldown. That's obviously because of cooldown reduction, but it's a 6-second base cooldown. So if you have some cooldown reduction, that probably goes down to around 4 seconds, and then Bountiful Bow procs, it goes down to 2.5. So you can very easily get like a lot of quick casts off with Bountiful Bow. Party Punch is also decent for her as well, I think, but I would say Bow is overall better. Now, in terms of actual items, I have been liking Doom Orb Rush on her. For a similar reason that you would build Gem of Focus in mid, having that extra movement speed is really nice for a magical assassin. It's kind of a little bit harder for mages to get their hands on movement speed compared to assassins. You know, assassins have like the whole katana tree and other things that give them movement speed, whereas with mages, your main two options are Doom Orb and the Gem of Focus. There's a couple of other ones as well, especially if you want to build rings, but I don't really think rings is the way to go on her. I think just full burst damage is a lot better. You need high power on this god because her passive is only power scaling, and her passive is like half of her damage. It's insane. But yeah, I have been liking Doom Orb on her. Some people have also been going Bancrofts. I think Bancrofts is also really good on her. You can go into Bancroft's Claw, I would recommend. You can go Nimble Bancroft as well if you want a little bit of extra attack speed. This caps at, I think, 40% attack speed, which is solid. You know, if you have this plus this, that's 75% attack speed from just 2 items, and you can actually just get, like, decent attack speed in the late game while not hampering your power all too much. I do also like Bancroft's Claw on her. I think it's decent as well. That extra max HP shield and stuff helps her just, like, sustain in team fights and things like that. Personally, though, I'm not actually a huge fan of Bancroft's Rush on her. It is good, don't get me wrong. Having the sustain is really great, but I do personally prefer, like, going into a Doom Orb and then like flat pen rush. I think just like your standard mage build, something like this is going to give you a lot more like overall damage output. Yes, you lose out on a bit of sustain, but I think that's fine. Polynomicon, I think, is pretty much essential on her. It's a really good item for her. You're going to be building very high power with her again because of her passive being power scaling and stuff like that. You really need a lot of power on this god to make her like truly viable. Of course, like Bomber's Hammer, it's not going to proc multiple times on the one. You'll get one proc of it off the one, and then you're not going to keep getting it every time you do it. But yeah, you can do this and stun and then get stuff like that. Her 2 is a pretty good AA cancel. You can 3 and then pop out an auto for a polyproc as well. Obviously, she's not as broken as you would think. She can't just keep procking poly like this repeatedly, only after you do the stun, but I think poly is still absolutely great on her. You're building high power, she has decent AA cancels, great ways to proc poly overall, I would say. So I think poly is probably a core item for her. And then because I'm going poly, I do like to go Spear of the Magus as well. And so Spear of the Magus is really good for her in my opinion, because she often applies small hits, which means you're not going to like lose out on a big amount of burst damage. Like obviously if you're engaging with the ult or whatever, then you're only going to apply the mark after that and the ult's not going to benefit. But a lot of the time you're going to be engaging with like this or like blink into this, and then you've got that mark on them the whole time, and it's scaling the damage of your passive spikes, it's scaling the damage of all of your other abilities, it's scaling the damage of Madame's mark. And since you engage with like just this initial tick right here is often your engage. And so everything after that is dealing increased damage with Spear of the Magus passive, which I think is really nice for her. So basically, this item, you can read it as you deal 7.5% increased damage, or 5%, they've actually nerfed it. You deal 5% increased damage. You can read that passive as. You're always going to have it active, and only the first tick of that is going to be not benefiting. Everything else is going to be benefiting from Spear of the Magus passive. And so yeah, I think Magus is really good for her. And then because we're building Polynomicon and Magus in the same build, I do like to go into a Typhons as my percent pen option. I think in this kind of a build, it's just definitely better than like going for something like Obsidian Shard or Charon's Coin. It has the same base amount of pen. Obviously Obsidian Shard has more pen overall, but you also get an insane amount of benefits from this item. You get 65 power by default, but then also you're building plenty of magical lifesteal, so you get a lot more. It's probably closer to like 100 power with this item, to be honest. And then you're sitting at 26% lifesteal, and that healing is also increased as well. So basically you're going to have a lot of lifesteal with this kind of a build. So yeah, I'll just show you on a camp here, for example. Like you can see you're getting a good amount of lifesteal here. It's It's not like earth-shattering or anything. It's not gonna like make you unkillable in team fights, but it is really good for just like sustaining throughout the jungle. You know, it'll just keep you topped up overall. And then, for example, if you do get poked out in a team fight, going off to clear a jungle camp can easily heal like 20-30% of your health when you've got this kind of a build. So it is really nice in my opinion. And since I'm already wanting to go poly and spear regardless just for their passives, and then that extra like 16% lifesteal I've got from these items in total means that Typhons is definitely worth going in my opinion. And then yeah, with a build like this, you're looking at capped percent pen from Doom Orb, Spear of the Magus, and Typhons. You're looking at decent attack speed, 1.71 at level 20 from the Eye of the Jungle attack speed. So, and I think this is enough attack speed. Like, I don't think you really need more than about 2.0, and this is a little bit less than that, but you do have very high power with this build, making all those spikes apply an insane amount of damage. You have flat pen and Doom Orb in the early game, so you have a lot of like early game power and pen to be able to burst people down in terms of like being able to early pressure. You have Polynomicon passive, getting you a ton of extra damage. That's like 459 right there, just extra, which is really nice. So yeah, I think this build has a lot to offer. You could also, if you wanted to, I know I've mentioned this, a lot of people are doing this on her. You could also just swap out the Doom Orb for like a Bancross if you wanted to, and then go into like Bancross Claw. So you can do a build like this as well. You're gonna have overall more lifesteal with this, probably slightly less power, and no movement speed either. But this is also a very solid option in my opinion, because you can get those Bancross Claw passive ticks doing extra damage and also giving you a health shield and stuff. So yeah, I think overall, Bancross Claw also worth considering. But I am more of a fan of the Doom Orb myself, I think. In terms of relics for Marman, I think you're pretty much always going Beads Blink on her, to be honest. She doesn't really need Aegis quite as much because her 3 kind of acts as a pseudo Aegis. So like, if you're about to get Vulcan ulted, you can very easily just dash into an enemy and completely immune it. So she really doesn't need Aegis all that much, and she doesn't really have a great engage unless you're ulting. Like, you can ult in like this, and then that can be a decent engage. You follow up off the knock-up and just like do your stuff there. But like, she doesn't really have an amazing engage unless she's ulting in. And if you're ulting in, you're also getting a smaller ult because you probably won't have as many soul orbs if you're going to be initiating the fight with the ult versus if you like go in like this and do some stuff. You're going to get like full soul orbs by doing that, and then your ult is going to be this size instead. So you would rather use the ult after the rest of your kit, but you can engage with it. But usually you don't want to, and Blink is really nice for that. You can blink in, like go in insta-stun like that, and then do stuff like this and get your damage off. I think Blink is really good for her because she doesn't really have a critical way to engage, because usually you don't want to be engaging just like this, because then you burn your dash and you're kind of like a sitting duck at that point. And also you don't apply the mark. You know, you would like to blink in and like apply this mark first before you do anything really. You can blink in and insta-stun, obviously. It will sacrifice a little bit of damage for a bit more lockdown. It's kind of like a risk you have to take when you're playing this god. But yeah, I think Beast Blink is defo the way to go. I have been experimenting a little bit with Sprint. I don't think it's that great, but I have been trying a little bit of Sprint, both upgrades actually. So you can go into either Entangling Wings to get a little bit of extra CC. Her CC is a little bit lacking, other than her stun. Obviously the ult knockup is quite low range as well, so having this route can be really nice. And also Hastened Wings is kind of funny as well, because you can just like pop this and then just absolutely zoom around like auto-attacking people like no one's business. That's also kind of funny. But overall, I do think Blink is just the better way for her to kind of engage. That is one thing this build is lacking, by the way. It's very much lacking in CDR, but I think it's actually fine because there's other stats you want on Maman Brigitte. You do have 10% cooldown, and it'll be 20% cooldown with the Potion of Power, but I really don't think she needs cooldown reduction all that much. Her cooldowns are already really low. Can I turn off the cooldown thing by going back into this? I can, cool. Yeah, so if we have a look at her cooldowns here, her 2 is 9.9 seconds with this build. Her 1 is 5.4 seconds. Obviously, that can go up if you do the insta-stun. If you do the insta-stun, that's like, what, about 12 seconds or so? Her dash is 14.4. Her ult is standard 90. Like, I don't think she really needs cooldown reduction all that much. And to be honest, you're just like kind of looking to go in, get like a rotation of your kit off, and blow someone up, and then kind of like slink out, wait for cooldowns, maybe ult or something like that. So I really don't think she needs as much cooldown as like a standard mage would need. So I do think this build is actually fine. But if you want more cooldown, if you're in mid, you can obviously go for the Pendulum of the Ages. This is kind of like the go-to for mage mid laners, 20% cooldown. You can also grab a Chronos pendant on her somewhere. But like if you're trying to go for more CDR in this build, you're gonna have to sacrifice something somewhere. You know, be it the Doom Orb early game, or like one of these 3 items, this kind of like lifesteal core. You can absolutely go her without lifesteal. I just like her with a little bit of lifesteal. But if you wanted to go her without lifesteal, you could easily like sell the spear and the Typhons, for example, and then get like a different percent pen item. Maybe get an Obsidian Shard or a Charon's Coin or something like that, and then you have one slot available for some cooldown reduction, you know, be that like Chronos Pendant or whatever. And so this kind of a build, you're gonna have way less lifesteal, pretty much no lifesteal at all. The 8% from poly is like very negligible, but you will have like much lower cooldowns if you're gonna do it this way. But personally, I do like having that like triple lifesteal core. I think it's really good. So this is what I like to go in general. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about with Maman Brigitte. I just thought I'd bring you guys like a quick guide for her like on release, because I think she is a really interesting design, but she's also quite difficult to play, and there's a lot you need to think about. I think a lot of people don't realize a lot of the things that her kit can do, you know, like this mark, for example, the double hit, and then also the fact that it doubles all of your spikes is just completely busted. You can see how many spikes rotations I'm getting there. It's completely nuts, and then also you can reapply it with this. So like you can pretty much always have the mark on people. So like it's about to expire, you just reapply it, and then just keep going through, running through people with these spikes damage. It's kind of insane. So I just thought I would give you guys a guide on how to play her more effectively, some tips and tricks, builds, relics, all that kind of stuff. So hopefully you guys enjoyed, and I will catch you guys in another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.